Very fittingly, I wanted to now introduce Rebecca Fallon. She is the Director of Wellness Services at the Sotile Center for Resilience. She's a published author and national speaker, and I am so blessed, and my patients who have seen Rebecca are so blessed to have her as a resource. And I'm really thankful to the Richardson Fund here at Sanger Heart and Vascular Institute, which allows me to refer my patients to see Rebecca to help with some of the anxiety and depression and PTSD that patients can experience after a tough diagnosis. So Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me on a Saturday again. She never says no to me. So I just want to thank you so much. Can we get a round of applause for Rebecca?
Well, thanks so much. I am so glad to be here. It is not 9 a.m. and I have already teared up like 6 times. So it's a lot. I love coming to speak with you guys. So as Dr. Kim mentioned, I do a lot of work across the system, but work with heart patients of different varieties. And Dr. Kim has been such an advocate of recognizing, the emotional toll that a diagnosis like FMD or SCAD can take, and kind of that uncertainty, navigating that. The truth is, people are profoundly resilient, and it is my privilege to work with people and just be inspired by such strength patients have in navigating particularly really uncertain diagnoses and how to move on from that. So we are going to talk a little bit about kind of the psychological implications of that and some strategies for staying as resilient as possible in the face of uncertainty. I'll tell you a little bit statistically. Heart patients in general have a fair amount of anxiety and depression. So there's something that we call the cardiac blues, which is after any kind of heart event, heart attack, diagnosis, stent, even stuff that feels relatively minor and fixable, it is very common for people to have at least some symptoms of anxiety and depression. When we look at a diagnosis like FMD specifically, we certainly see some of that, particularly right after diagnosis. I always tell patients usually that first year or so is the most difficult. Frequent worry for sure. Frustration with healthcare. I think anytime you're navigating something where it can take a long time, as you guys have already heard this morning, you kind of maybe people aren't listening, and not to the fault of the medical professional, but they perhaps are not educated to recognize this type of thing. And so it can be a long journey to diagnosis. A lot of these symptoms are also more prevalent the younger you are. And we have a lot of young heart patients of all kinds. Obviously, FMD, SCAD in particular, so frequently affects young women, and it can feel like such an untimely thing to be dealing with. It's sort of like shakes your identity in a way. I'm now in this club of heart patient that nobody wants to join, but apparently I'm a member, and that does not at all fit with what I saw happening at this stage of my life. So certainly some psychological strain. I would say if any of that feels familiar to you, you are not alone. One of the things I do in my work is what I call resilience coaching. And there are some things we know help people stay more resilient in navigating difficult times. A lot of times people tie resilience in with this concept of happiness. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that actually means. I want to start off with a question for you. If you had to rate, how happy are you? Scale of 1 to 10 right now. And this is not a little audience response one. This is just, y'all are so obedient. Y'all are like, this is just in your head. Keep your number. We'll come back to it. But the challenge with this is to say, okay, right now, all things considered, my life as it is, how happy am I? And what does that even mean? And what has been amazing to me, the reason my work is so inspiring to me is I talk with people every day who on paper have been through the ringer, and you might read it and go, oh, that person's got to be discouraged, or they've got to be overwhelmed and sad, and they're completely happy. They are fulfilled. They have figured out those strategies to really create that sort of internal bank of gratitude and happiness and that sense of enoughness to navigate anything that's happening externally. So we will talk about kind of some ways to do that. I mean, I think one thing to acknowledge is that navigating a diagnosis like FMD can feel like a very unique type of stress. And when we talk about stress, we like to blame stress for a lot of things. However, there is a good kind of stress. Not all stress is bad. Good stress is what we call high demand, high control stress. So if you think about things in your life that you have navigated, maybe you had a job that was very stressful, is high demand, but you had a high sense of control. You knew how to do the job, you're good at it, you've done it a long time. That's the good kind of stress that keeps you engaged and invigorated and interested in something. Stress becomes more dangerous for us when that high control changes to low control. So high demand, low control is what we call toxic stress. So situations that are demanding, this matters, this is affecting my life in a big way, and I don't feel in control at all. And this, I think, is from what people have told me, very much how they feel, particularly at the beginning of any kind of diagnosis journey. What are you talking about? What do you mean? What does that mean? What does that mean for my future? What should I do now? Why did this happen? And when we are living with high demand, low control stress, we also run the risk of developing low support, which means our most supportive relationships kind of start to suffer. Because when you have that type of stress, it's really good to show up for relationships. You just don't have the emotional energy. You don't feel good. So showing up as a spouse, for your friends, even as a parent sometimes can feel incredibly challenging. And the reason this matters is that relationships are a vital part of resilience. So if we look at who are people who are happy, who are resilient, who navigate difficult stuff and still feel okay, they always have at least a couple of good supportive relationships, not perfect relationships, but we want those to be as healthy as possible. So this is another question I want you to think about just in your head. Who are you to the people that you love and the people you work with, if you work, whatever you define that to be? The reason this question is good to consider is because it gives you a sense of the status of those relationships. What kind of space do you create for people? How do people feel in your presence? How, inspiring are you? Are you very critical? Are you scary to people at times? This is tough. It's tough to acknowledge, but sometimes resilience starts with kind of taking a personal inventory and being real honest about what are the ways my relationships could feel and actually be more supportive. One thing I talk a lot about is this myth of balance. So when we talk about stress, when we talk about happiness, one thing that often erodes at our happiness is when we hold ourselves to unattainable standards. I think this is particularly true for women. We have a lot of, people telling us or imagery telling us or whatever, that if we think of these as kind of our main life areas, we should be able to do them all. I mean, you grow up as a little girl, you kind of decide, oh, I should probably create a family and have a good relationship and maybe do work that's fulfilling. And, of course, I'm going to take care of myself and look amazing while I'm doing it because I'm working out and getting my hair done and all the things. And so subconsciously, we're sort of holding ourselves to this unattainable standard, which inevitably leads to feeling like crap, basically being anxious, right? Wherever I am, I'm anxious about where I'm not. I see this, I do coaching with high performing women all the time. The level of anxiety, like, again, if you were to look on paper, you'd say, oh, she's killing it. She must be so fulfilled and happy. She's a wreck. She's so anxious. Wherever she is, she's anxious about where she's not. She is feeling guilty. Like maybe she's killing it at work. She's guilt ridden about how she and her husband haven't gone on a date in 3 months, or she hadn't put her kids to bed in 2 weeks, or whatever. I mean, all the self-imposed guilt we carry. And ultimately, you feel angry because it just does not feel good to be set up for failure over and over again. So this myth of balance is one we want to kind of get rid of when we're talking about how to stay resilient. Now, when I say resilience, I define resilience as going through a difficult period and coming out stronger in some way, not being defeated by it. I want to clarify, resilience does not mean pretending to be okay when you're not and just tough it out. It means allowing yourself to feel the weight of what's going on and find ways to evolve beyond that. The good news about resilience is that it is not a preset trait. It's not like you're born with it or not. there are absolutely things we can do to kind of practice and build resilience skills over time. So if we take this high demand, low control, low support trifecta of toxic stress, we're going to talk about what can I do to manipulate the bottom two variables. I may not be able to do anything about the demands of this situation, but I can certainly develop skills to feel and actually be more in control, and to broaden and deepen my supportive relationships so that those feel better. This is all about doing what's called paying attention to what's beneath your feet. So I had a patient years ago who was a rock climber, and she was telling me one of the mistakes people make when they're trying to learn how to rock climb is they're always looking up, and they're reaching for something that's a little bit too far. And so they end up falling. She said, the best way to climb a mountain is to look down at your feet and decide, what is the next right step for me to make, the easiest thing to get to. And I thought, well, that is a great metaphor for resilience, because there are times in life where really that's all you can do is ask yourself, what's the next right thing, right? This past year, I'll tell you just on a personal note, we navigated some difficult health stuff with my daughter, who's 15. And it was one of those moments where I thought, I am going to forever think of my life in terms of before and after this. And for a while, there was this period of uncertainty about what is going on and what I learned about myself too, is I talk about this all day long, and boy, will I lose my mind when it personally affects me, and catastrophize like you wouldn't believe, and immediately go to worst case scenario and be so hijacked by stress. And there were days where I remember thinking, what is the next thing to do? Okay, I'm going to put this mug in the dishwasher. Okay, I'm going to go sit. Okay, now I also have a son. I guess I should feed him. I mean, it was literally moment to moment because I was so hijacked by fear and stress and confusion. And so it really hit home for me, the stuff that I, tap dance around being an expert on. I have been through some of that recently. The thing to keep in mind, one of the things we're shooting for is what we call post-trauma growth. So you have a moment in life that stops you on a dime. It's a trauma. We hear a lot about post-trauma stress, the negative effects, after effects, which are very real. What happens much more frequently, however, and is good to remember, is post-trauma growth. You ask anyone who has navigated a difficult, you could all stand up and tell me your journey and how you've grown. What has happened to you? Most of us going through some type of trauma, we rise to a higher level of psychological functioning. Patients tell me this all the time. I suddenly value my relationships so differently. Or, you know what I do? I don't sweat the small stuff at all the way I used to. I have such a different perspective on what matters and what's worth my time and energy. Or my spirituality evolved, or I got motivated to change certain things. So there's a lot of positive growth that can come in the wake of moments like this and journeys like this. But going back to that high demand, low control stress, to achieve post-traumatic growth, we got to focus on what can I control? That is the best question to always come back to. Anxiety and depression are from ruminating on things we cannot control. And trust me, I'm an expert on it. Coming back to what can I control? What is the next thing to do? What do I need to really do to take care of myself during this time is important. So 3 big things we're going to talk about: energy, attitude, and relationships. So just think of EAR, the little EAR acronym. First of all, energy. I will say this. Is anyone here Taylor Swift fan? Any Swifties? Okay. I am not like a Swiftie, but I think she is a cultural phenomenon and she fascinates me. I think she's brilliant. She was recently on her boyfriend, Travis Kelce's podcast. She had a quote about energy where she said, I had a therapist tell me years ago, think of your energy as a luxury item. Not everybody can have it. And not everybody has put in the work to deserve it, basically. It's expensive. That is how we should be thinking of our energy. We have a finite amount of energy, emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. It's not infinite. And everything you do is either going to make a deposit or withdrawal from that bank account of energy. When times are stressful, when life is overwhelming, you have to be militant about what you're doing to erode your energy. Going through this stuff with my daughter, I will tell you, I immediately knew I cannot be on social media. I picked up my phone and tried to zone out. And it was like, I am already so hyper aroused by stress that this feels like way too much. There were certain friends that I had a hard time being around. You know, you have friends who want to give you advice or want to teach you something and they don't actually really know what they're talking about. And they're trying to be supportive. I couldn't take it. My physical body was like rejecting that. I have to have a boundary. I have to have some space from this person. I have to find the people that feel like the kind of energy I need right now. And that became really clear to me. So with energy, we want to maximize our deposits and minimize our withdrawals, just like our money, right? This is a little worksheet I use sometime. Identify for yourself, what are the things that take a withdrawal? And this can be physical stuff, habits, when I stay up too late scrolling on my phone, when I drink too much caffeine and then I can't sleep, when I'm not exercising, but also people, you know, it can be, again, personal habits. I get distracted, I procrastinate. What are the things that set you up to kind of have an energy crash? And then also identifying what are the boosters to your energy. Physically, when I'm doing X, Y, and Z, I know I feel better. When I'm going to see my therapist, when I'm making time for going to church or connecting with certain people in that way, that's really, really important to recognize and try to maximize, particularly during a difficult season. What is true is that if you look at the research on human performance, most of us perform better when we're stretched a little bit. You know, life gets busy enough, you just keep clicking along and get super efficient. But it's a real short walk from that target zone to the point where we feel completely fatigued and overwhelmed. And we got to do whatever we can to kind of keep ourselves in the target zone. Another thing to think about, be aware of your stress symptoms. Everyone is different here. We all have physical symptoms. So think about your own self. Maybe you've never thought about this before. What happens in your body when you feel stressed? Some people feel sick to their stomach. Some people get real agitated. Other people get exhausted. What happens to your emotions? Do you get sad? Do you get angry? Do you get scared? What are your stress thinking behaviors? I'll tell you mine. I go to worst case scenario in 0.5 seconds. A lot of us get real catastrophic when we're stressed, or we get real black and white, all or nothing kind of thinking, usually not helpful. What behaviors do you have when you're stressed? It's usually not our best behaviors. You know, we drink too much, we stop sleeping, we eat too much, or we stop eating, whatever that is for you. And then recognize stress is also going to affect those interpersonal relationships. So what do you do in your personal relationships when you're stressed? Maybe you start picking a fight with your spouse. Maybe you suddenly get real sensitive and get your feelings hurt real easily. Maybe you get angry at them because you're actually just overwhelmed with stress. And that's something we could maybe talk about. Because again, those relationships are just going to be vital as you navigate this stuff. A good thing to recognize is a crucial relationship between daily hassles and daily uplifts. Daily hassles are the things we deal with all day, you know, sitting in traffic, people who are rude, turning on the news for 30 seconds and some craziness is going on, right? That's always going to be what it is. What happy, resilient people know how to do, they don't have fewer hassles. They know how to harvest the uplifts that offset all of those hassles that will always be true. And this is research from a psychologist, Barbara Fredrickson. She has a great book, Positivity. She's the one who asked this question, how happy are you? And her theory is we'd all be off the charts in terms of happiness if we knew how to find the uplifts every day. She defines 10 specific uplifts to look for. I'm not going to go through all of them, but one of them is joy. So I think joy is one of those emotions that is kind of contagious. If you're not feeling joyful, just watch some people cracking up laughing with each other and you can feel it in your body. This is a picture of my daughter now. She's turning 16 in about 3 weeks. So this was a long time ago. But I think this embodies joy. Children embody joy, right? Why? Because they're present. All she's doing in this moment is laughing on a swing in the sun, not thinking about, you know, whatever, the news, the traffic, all those things that we are inundated with. So kids, I think, are a good representation of that joy. Things like gratitude. Gratitude's probably the most well-researched thing that's correlated with happiness and well-being. being very intentional about practicing gratitude, finding moments of serenity each day. Take some deep breaths. I mean, listen, there's a lot of wisdom in the phrase, take a deep breath. It calms your nervous system down. Hope. I think this is a tricky one today. I think you could, again, watch TV or look on social media for 10 seconds and you can find a lot to feel hopeless about. There's still a lot of good stuff happening. There's a lot of incredible people doing incredible work. As a patient, you are at the front lines of recognizing a lot of that. Meetings like this instill such a sense of hope about, things can work out and feel good when you're surrounded by people who get what you're going through. Allowing yourself to be inspired by each other. I think love is a big one. We obviously want to be around the folks we love. We like to have little reminders of the people we love. Several years ago, again, my daughter's about to be 16, my son's about to be 13. And years ago, they were little. I was working in corporate America, kind of overwhelmed, trying to figure out how to be a mom and work and not kill everyone in the meantime. And I was conflicted. There was something going on at work and I've been presented with this opportunity and I was just doubting myself. I don't know if I can actually do that job and it's going to take me away more. And am I really the one they need for that? And I was riddled with self-doubt. And my daughter, Macy, came home from school. I think she was in first grade. And I was unpacking her backpack. She had all these little papers in there. And all of a sudden I see this piece of paper that says, "Mommy, be brave." These 3 little hearts. And I thought, okay, universe, what are you doing? Because she did not know I was like riddled with self-doubt about this work thing and also just about being a mom in general. And so I said, "Oh my gosh, did you make this for me?" "Yeah." "Well, why did you make this for me? What does mommy need to be brave about?" And she looked at me like I'm the biggest idiot, which now that she's almost 16, this is permanent. And she said, "Because you're scared of tarantulas, duh." Yeah. Which I am. Kind of feel like we should all be scared of tarantulas. But when they were little, my kids found it hilarious that mommy's so scared of spiders. And so at that moment, I thought, oh my goodness, little girl, you have no idea what a gift you just gave me. Because the truth is, I'm scared of a lot. And I do need to be brave. And I need to remind myself to be brave. And so over the years, Mommy Be Brave has been on the fridge. We redid our kitchen once, and I swear it was by then it was taped on a cabinet. It was the last thing that came out of our kitchen. And I think over the years, I have had to think about what does it mean to be brave? Sometimes being brave means saying yes. Yes, I want that job. Yes, I'll take that. Yes, I'll do that thing because I'm good. And a lot of times being brave means saying no. No, I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm not going to beat myself up for it. No, I'm not going to absorb your energy right now because I can't. Boundaries are often about saying no, and that's often the bravest thing we can do. Attitude, the one thing I'll say about attitudes are contagious. Think about, what am I spreading? Every day I get up, I have a choice. What am I putting into the world? There are a couple of attitudes we know are correlated with staying resilient. One of them is incorporation. When something happens, again, when you get a phone call, you get a diagnosis, you have that feeling of, my life will now be divided into before and after this. You have a choice. You can tell yourself a story of incorporation or a story of disruption. A story of disruption is, my life was good, and then this happened, and now everything's different and will always be different. A story of incorporation, which is what we should all strive for, is, my life is about a lot of things. My life is complex. There's a lot of great stuff in my life that's never going to change. There's a lot of stuff in my life that's going to be good, even with this going on. I am in a chapter of my life I was not expecting to be writing. But the book continues. This is one chapter that's going to make this a good story one day. And there's a lot of good stuff yet to come. Another really important one is realistic optimism. We know from the research, having optimism about health outcomes is hugely important. This is not rose-colored glasses optimism, pretend everything is okay. This is, I understand what is challenging, what I need to do, and I'm going to maintain a sense of hope that this is going to be better. At the beginning of this year, my phone screensaver I changed it to a quote that just simply says, what's the best that could happen? Because I look at my phone a million times a day, and that's what I want to think. I want my brain to think, what's the best that could happen? Your stupid brain always goes to what is the worst that could happen? Why do that? Why live there? Why not think about the best thing that could happen? What's the harm in that? Attitude management, one thing to think about, what do you do in the first 5 minutes of your day? You wake up, your attitude is neutral, at least for a second, so you're at a 0. And then if you're like a lot of people, you touch your phone and immediately it goes to a -5 because something on there is going to piss you off. Okay, let's be honest. You're going to see your calendar and go, oh God, or you're going to see a news headline or some idiot on Facebook trying to tell you what to do, whatever. You're going to spend the rest of your day trying to work your way up to 0. So think about, what can I do to put myself at a +5, right? Maybe before I get out of bed, I say a prayer. I set an intention for the day. I think about this day going as well as it could. How do I want to show up today? Maybe I get up and pet my dog and drink a glass of water and then give my day away to my phone. So just think about even that first 5 minutes. Lastly, relationships. Presence is important in relationships. These days, I think a good thing to remember, the greatest gift you can give is your attention. People talk about your time. You can waste your time. Your attention is your greatest gift. And these days, very few things ever have our full attention. Even the people we love the most, right? We got our phones, we're distracted, we're thinking about something else because our brains work overtime. If we go back to this myth of balance, trying to balance doesn't feel great. The term doesn't even make sense. Balance means, oh, it's all getting the same attention at the same time. It's not going to work. What is true, think about crossing a stream on these rocks. What you got to do is pick a rock, plant your feet until it's time to go to the next rock. So what we're seeking is not balance, but it's purpose, it's meaning, it's engagement. When we look at burnout, when we look at why do I feel so overwhelmed, it's because I'm not engaged. You know, I love the saying, let your head be where your feet are. If you're out in the world doing things, you know, as much as you can, fully engage. When you're at work, be fully engaged. Let go of the anxiety and the guilt about whatever's going on at home or however else you're failing in your life, which is a lot of our internal voice. When you're with your loved ones, as much as you can, give them your full attention. Show up as your best self. Take responsibility for, you know, your energy, your attitude, things like that, to show up so that those relationships feel more supportive. Part of my work in resilience is talking about heroes. My parents wrote a book several years ago, and they defined a hero as somebody who creates safe spaces for other people, which I love. I love the thought of that because it means anyone can be a hero. It's no major feat, really. It doesn't sound like a major feat to create safe spaces, but it truly has an effect on people. You guys have experienced that. You know, the physicians who are here, the people who are here speaking, they are creating a safe space for you to feel seen, for you to feel heard. The crux of so much psychological distress is people not feeling seen and heard. So we can make the people in our life feel more that way. Last thing I'm going to tell you, I always think about my grandmother when I think about heroes. This is my grandmother, Eleanor. She died, gosh, probably 13 years ago. I think about her all the time still. And every memory I have, she looks like this. She cracked up laughing a million times a day. She had the most childlike sense of humor. She was such a source of joy. The more I think about her, you know, I think about that list of uplifts. And what's amazing to me is she basically had them all. And it's astounding to think about that being true. The older I get and the more, you know, you get older and you see your parents and your grandparents in a different light. And I think about her life. And it's amazing to me that throughout my life, she was such a safe space. You know, she was joyful. Again, she embodied joy. She was grateful for what she had, which was not a lot. She remained hopeful throughout a life that I now know had a lot of trauma in it. She was raised in rural Alabama during the Great Depression, one of 7 kids. Her dad was killed in a coal mine when she was 13. At the tender age of 17, she met my grandfather, who looks like this in every memory I have of him. He was a very, I mean, fought for our country. He was a sergeant major in the 82nd Airborne at Fort Bragg. They got married at 18, and at 19, she had my mom. A couple years later, another child. They built this life, you know, and it was not easy. And as you can see, he was not real warm and fuzzy, but brave soldier. And throughout my life, my grandmother was that safe space for me. I mean, I would see her when I was in high school. They moved down the street from us. I'd see her all the time. And yet, the moment I arrived, the world stopped. And she would take my hand and sit down and just look at me and say, okay, tell me everything. Tell me about that test you had to take. I remember you said that. Tell me about that boy you've been dating. I want to know. Now, she didn't know what that test was about. I promise you, she did not like that boy, whoever he was. But the message I always got from her was, I see you. You are loved unconditionally. You don't have to do A, B, and C for me to love you. You're mine. So that's it. You're in. And it's such a gift to give somebody that. Now, talking about resilience, my grandmother at the age of 55 decided she wanted to go to college. Now, she wasn't going to go work in corporate America or anything, but knowledge is power. She always told me that. And she said, there's some more knowledge. I want to know it. Now, the sergeant major was not real happy about this because she was sort of distracted for quite some time. But I remember watching her type on a typewriter and use whiteout, you know, writing her papers. Y'all remember that? And it's amazing to me now. At the time, I didn't think much about it. I was a kid, you know, but she enrolled at Campbell University, went to college, and at 62 became the oldest person to graduate. So her, you know, going through difficult stuff, I think I always think of her. I think of her resilience. I think of her ability to maintain that space for me, even with all she was struggling with. And her message always was, be generous and be gracious. Not just with other people, because that can get you overextended, but also with yourself. Be generous with yourself. Guard that energy. Be gracious, be grateful, yes, and also understand you can ask for help. You can give help to each other. I love it that y'all are all here today. I think the ability to offer that to each other and create that space is just phenomenal. So I certainly hope you enjoy the day, and I am happy to. I unfortunately have to rush to a soccer tournament in Raleigh with the daughter who's kicking butt. But Dr. Kim has my contact info. You guys can send me an email. Like if there's anything I can do, please let me know. And thanks for being here.